Deeply insightful.
An hour.
1 hour.
Deeply personal.
2 mics.
2 microphones.
4 woks going at the same time, one for each hand.
Can you murder him, please?
Hey, what?
Unforgettable stories.
We got hit by a wave and I was just in this sort of penumbra of bubbles, this world of fizz. And it was very beautiful. I didn't notice that I was drowning.
Hear the latest from Conversations. Find it on the ABC Listen app.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Today, things got a bit funky in the Erin Patterson trial. I'm the ABC's court reporter, Kristian Silva.
And I'm Stephen Stockwell. It is Tuesday the 13th of May, and we've just finished the 9th day of this trial. Welcome to Mushroom Case Daily.
The small-town mystery that's gripped the nation and made headlines around the world.
Ms. Patterson admits she lied to police about foraging for mushrooms.
A doctor says he told Erin Patterson she could die without urgent treatment.
At the heart of this case will be the jury's interpretation of Erin Patterson's intentions.
It's a tragedy what's happened. I love them.
Kristian, we've just come out of the first day of the third week of Erin Patterson's trial. Can you give us a quick rundown of what we heard in court today?
Sure, Stocky. Much of the day was taken up by an international mushroom expert, Dr. Tom May. He talked a lot about death cap mushrooms today, and also a curious link that he appears to have to this case itself. We also heard from more doctors who treated Erin Patterson in hospital after the deadly lunch. 2 of them said that her test results appeared to be normal. And there was also a written statement read out to the court from the friend of Erin Patterson's son.
Thank you, Kristian. And today we heard a lot from a mushroom expert, Dr. Tom May. He's a mycologist and he works at the Royal Botanic Gardens and also works for the Victorians Poisons Information Line. Basically a half-day lecture on mushrooms, death cap mushrooms. And something that's worth having in your mind as we're going through today's episode is that the prosecution alleged at the start of this trial in the opening that Erin Patterson visited a website which had reports of death cap mushrooms and then travelled to areas where those mushrooms were spotted. And so today was all about death cap mushroom, Amanita phalloides. Am I saying that right?
Amanita phalloides is the pronunciation I'm going to go with, and that's because Dr. Tom May said it. I think we've heard this term butchered by just about everyone in this trial, and I'm glad he said it, and let's try and stick to that.
Yeah, Amanita phalloides.
Phalloides.
He talked about where they grow, where they came from, and how long they would last if you picked them and put them in your fridge.
He took us through a real history lesson. So these were first reported in Australia in the 1960s. It now appears to have spread across a large portion of the country. And he said, look, if you take these things out of the wild, there's a good chance that there's actually insects that have infested them. So even within a couple of days, they start to go bad, as opposed to your mushrooms you might buy from the supermarket, which hasn't got those infestations. But really only a couple of days that wild mushrooms typically are good to eat before they start to go a bit bad.
Yeah.
A bit mushy, he said.
A bit mushy. And while he was giving evidence today, we had a little presentation up on the screen, which I thought was, again, quite helpful, really added to the lecture vibe that today's evidence had. And quite a bit of the conversation revolved around this iNaturalist website. Now, iNaturalist is a citizen science website, and we heard today from Dr. Tom May that since it was, kind of introduced and people started using it, there's been over 400,000 reports or observations of fungi around Australia. So there's a huge number of reports of mushrooms on that. It's not just mushrooms, it's all sorts of flora and fauna, but specifically around that. And it was just interesting hearing how widespread the use of that website was.
It sounds like it's a real community there of keen nature watchers. And Dr. Tom May is also one of those keen nature watchers and a contributor to the iNaturalist website. And he told the court that his username is funkeytom, no doubt a play on the fungi element. Probably didn't need to explain all of that, over-explained it a bit.
No, look, it's always very good to know and clarify. It does strike me a little bit as one of those usernames he's come up with maybe in the late 90s, mid-2000s that he's now kind of stuck with and has now been introduced into a court of law and discussed in there. But this isn't the first time we've heard Funky Tom discussed in this trial, is it, Kristian?
No, I had to cast my mind back to the opening day, and we heard a reference to this Funky Tom in Nanette Rogers' opening statements. And I mentioned the curious link that Dr. Tom May has got to these allegations in this case. So it turns out that in April and May 2023, a few months before the lunch, that there were postings on the iNaturalist website about death cap mushrooms growing in a place called Lock and a place called Outram. These are fairly close to Erin Patterson's house.
Right.
And the post that was made in May about a sighting of death cap mushrooms in Outram was actually made by Dr. Tom himself, Funky Tom. And he said he just happened to be in the area. He was doing a presentation, went for a walk, and spotted them and posted them online. Now, the prosecution say that the day after Funky Tom put this online, Erin Patterson went to Outram.
And the interesting thing that we saw today about how the iNaturalist website works is that you can attach very specific locations to the observations you're making. So one example, and this is not the example that the prosecution is alleging that Erin Patterson went to, but there was a sort of a screenshot of a park that was put up, and you could see, zoom quite close into that, and you could see one was near a path heading across this park in one direction, one was at another section of the park. So you get quite a detailed view of where these things are, right?
The users can be pretty specific about where they pinpoint.
Yeah, and there was a lot of conversation around where a lot of these observations were. So most of the observations that we saw when we had a look at a map of Victoria today were focused around Melbourne, and the prosecution was explaining, or I should say rather Dr. Tom May was explaining, you see that because that's where most of the people are. But as well as that, we're also seeing a few reports around Gippsland, which is the area that this trial is being held in and where this lunch occurred and where Erin Patterson lived. So that was quite interesting as well, I thought. But there was a lot of conversation about where you would normally find these mushrooms.
Yeah, he said that they tend to grow around oak trees, and there's a few varieties of oaks that they tend to pop up from. And he said they tend to emerge around April or May. There's no set time for these things, but that's usually when they're sighted, and when there's the right combination of rain and soil moisture, that's when they tend to pop up.
Yeah, he made a point of saying that there does need to be a bit of moisture around at that time, like the mycelium, which is the bit of the mushroom that's below the ground growing within the root systems, that's growing all the time. But the time you see the spores, that's what we consider kind of the mushrooms popping up, that's something that we see usually after a little bit of rain that goes around. So, we had again, basically a mushroom lecture today, as well as the prosecution talking to Dr. Tom May today. The defence spent quite a bit of time kind of questioning him, talking to him about mushrooms, mostly revolving around the identification of death caps.
Yeah, and there was an interesting exercise that Dr. Tom May was asked to participate in, and he did willingly. And it was basically a game of spot the mushroom. And defence barrister Sophie Stafford put up a bunch of pictures of mushrooms and asked Dr. May to say, are these death caps or not? And there was about 10 that she put up. And basically for all 10, he said he reckoned they were death cap mushrooms, but in nearly all cases, he wanted to see a different angle of the photo. There were things that he was not too convinced by. And what Sophie Stafford then took him to was this question of, well, is it easy to identify a death cap mushroom? Because you might have some consistent things like a sort of yellowy, whitish, brownish tinge or gills, but is that the defining factor? And he said, look, it is not easy to tell them. A lot of people struggle to tell the difference. And then he elaborated that he's actually done research on some apps that have been designed to try to identify mushrooms, and his research found that the apps aren't very good.
Oh.
And either are the people who think they know what mushroom varieties are. Some who have, supposedly done some training still struggle with it. And through his work, a lot of people come to him to ask him about mushrooms. And he said he's had times when people have come to him asking if they can eat something, and he's taken a look at it and gone, oh no, this is dangerous.
There was a specific example that the defence cited today, and I mean, they even cited an article that he'd written once called Observations on the Ability of the Public to Identify Mushrooms, and there was this example they gave where a guy had come to him and said, "Hey, look, I've got this mushroom. I think it's fine to eat. Can you do a quick check of it?" And he was like, "No, don't eat that. That's a poisonous mushroom. I recommend you go and do a mushroom identifying course."
Dr. May's been doing this kind of work for a long time, and he said, about 30 years ago, his opinion was people shouldn't eat wild mushrooms, period, just because of the risk. Now he's kind of softened his position, and he said that if they do a whole bunch of training, what he termed as an apprenticeship into mushrooming, then maybe it's okay, but he placed the caveat that there's a risk with this and people can make mistakes, and when they do, it can be pretty dangerous.
Yeah, and he talked a bit about, the toxins that can be present in some of these mushrooms.
Yeah, he talked about the toxins. Some of these toxins do exist in other mushrooms. Some, I believe he said, are exclusive only to the death cap mushroom. And it's not just people who are at risk. He said a Cocker Spaniel ate a death cap mushroom and died. And he said there's no formal registry around death cap mushroom poisonings. But given his research, he remembered a case back around about the late 90s where a male is said to have picked up some wild mushrooms from a roadside, eaten them, and then a few days later died. And later testing revealed it was linked to Amanita phalloides.
And obviously, Kristian, these mushrooms can be very dangerous. We spoke a little bit earlier about these mushrooms coming from Europe, coming across from being imported in the roots of oak trees that came over here. We also saw a map of the distribution of death cap mushrooms today. What was the kind of purpose of that? What were we being shown there?
Around the world, a global map, and you could see areas around Australia and the US and Europe, especially bright yellow, indicating the existence of the death cap mushrooms. But one section in the map which was blank was China. And Dr. May was asked about this, do death cap mushrooms grow in China? And he said from his research and knowledge, the answer to that is no. The trial has heard that there has been a quest to find out the source of the mushrooms in this beef Wellington meal. Erin Patterson told authorities that she bought some from a local Woolworths and then a Asian or Chinese grocery store somewhere in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. So perhaps that was the relevance of that question.
Yep. We were lucky to actually hear from Funky Tom as well, because when his time to give evidence came, Dr. Danette Rogers, who's leading the prosecution, actually had to ask for a bit of a break because Tom had gone for a walk.
Yeah, that was the first moment of laughter in the courtroom today. The witnesses who were up before Dr. May must have been incredibly efficient because they were done fairly quickly. And Dr. May was nowhere to be found. Next to the court is the Morwell Gardens, and it's one of the landmarks of the town. I don't know if he was there, but I dare say maybe he was checking it out.
Maybe the few iNaturalist posts coming this afternoon. Keep an eye on Funky Tom's profile. Kristian, we've had a whole bunch of questions continuing to come into the Mushroom Case Daily inbox. That is mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. I want to jump into a quick one here from Christine from Park Orchards in Victoria. She's wondering if we can clarify any more details about the plates used during the beef Wellington lunch. Ian Wilkinson said there were 4 grey plates and 1 orange one. Erin's son said they were all white. Do we know what the white plates were used for? She just found it an interesting point in the difference of evidence.
I think it's a dispute in this case, and it briefly came up again today in the written statement of Erin Patterson's son's friend. And sorry, we can't name these kids due to a suppression order, so it's a bit of a wordy description we have to give. But this kid, in his statement, said that he recalled seeing plates in a sink. White plates, I believe, is what he said. There was no mention of an orange plate from him. And there was also no mention of an orange plate when Erin Patterson's son gave evidence. Now, one thing that is worth noting about both of these kids' evidence is They weren't subjected to cross-examination and extra questions. Erin's son's evidence was via a pre-recorded videotape, and his friend had a written statement which was read out.
Yep. We have a question here from Fiona from Wentworth Falls in New South Wales. She says, "Hi, loving the podcast." Thank you, Fiona. Her question is, did we see Erin's blood test when she went to hospital? She allegedly had diarrhea and was sick. Were her liver enzymes elevated at all? Intrigued.
Thanks, Fiona. We didn't actually see the test results, but we've had several doctors talk about the test results. So Dr. Laura Muldoon, who was part of the Monash Medical Centre's toxicology department, said that she noted that Erin Patterson looked clinically well. She had some chapped lips, but otherwise looked well. She had normal vital signs, is what Dr. Muldoon said. And there was another doctor, Varuna Raghu, who said Miss Patterson's liver functioning tests returned normal results. Also, what was normal was her respiratory rate, blood pressure, and temperature. And the doctor said that there was no evidence of any sort of liver toxicity. And as a result, Erin Patterson was in a position to be discharged. And Dr. Raghu said she appeared clinically well, in normal mood and affect.
A question here from Kristian. They're wondering, in regard to the vagueness of the Asian grocery store or stores that Erin Patterson states she went to, did the police trace her movements to any of them by using her phone, or did they find that she didn't go to these stores?
Thanks, Kristian. We haven't got to that particular part of the case in terms of the evidence yet. But if we go back to the openings from a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Nanette Rogers said that Erin Patterson wasn't able to identify a bank transaction which reflected this trip to the Asian grocer, and Erin told investigators that she believed she'd probably paid for mushrooms from the Asian store with cash. But it's correct to say that there's been multiple possible suburbs listed for this store. Oakley, Clayton, Glen Waverley, Mount Waverley are some of the names that have come up.
Yeah, we'll get into, we'll be able to give you more of those details as we get to that part of the case and the trial. So when we get some more information that we can give to you on that, we'll get to that and we'll talk you through it. We've got more of a statement from Glenn, not a question, but this is a response to something we spoke about in our episode yesterday where we answered a lot of your questions. It was around basically what the jury gets for lunch. And in this instance, they're going out for lunch. Most days they're not. We don't believe it's catered at the courthouse here. In Glenn's experience, he's done jury duty a few times. He says it was always catered. Orders were taken in the morning for lunch once on a trial, and food was supplied from an adjacent commercial operation. And they were also free to discuss the trial absolutely in its entirety. All evidence was invariably the subject of conversations. And yesterday we also spoke about what beyond reasonable doubt means. And he says that becomes a very clear concept when you're facing the decision as to the fate of another. So, Glenn, thank you for getting in touch and for your note there.
Thank you, Glenn.
If you've got a question you'd like us to answer on Mushroom Case Daily, please send us an email. Our email is mushroomcasedaily@abc.net.au. We're reading through all of them. We're checking them all. As I've mentioned before, there's a lot we can't answer because of the limitations of court reporting, but when we can, we will, and we're keeping a list of the other ones to follow up on.
Dr. Tom May, Funky Tom, is back on the stand tomorrow. Mushroom Case Daily is produced by ABC Audio Studios and ABC News. It's presented by me, court reporter Kristian Silva, and producer Stephen Stockwell.
Our executive producer is Claire Rawlinson, and many thanks to the Victorian Newsroom and Audio Studios manager Eric George, and our true crime colleagues Tim Roxburgh, Rachel Brown and Yasmin Parry for helping make this show a reality. This episode was produced on the land of the Gunai-Kurnai people.
You've been listening to an ABC podcast. Discover more great ABC podcasts, live radio and exclusives on the ABC Listen app.
Going somewhere? If you're getting out and about soon, pack a podcast that will take you on a real journey. Binge all seasons of ABC's Expanse podcast. There's spies, survival, grand heists and supernatural sightings. These are the stories of Australia you probably haven't heard, but won't be able to stop talking about once you do. All 4 seasons are available now. Just search Expanse on the ABC Listen app.